So, Secretary Cohen, when you hear the current Defence Secretary warning North Korea not to consider actions that could lead to the end of its regime and the destruction of its people, is that the right tone to strike?
I think it is, because he's talking about actions. It's not something that I haven't said in the past in all of my years in dealing with North Korea, that if you ever attack the South Korean peninsula, South Korean allies, Americans on that peninsula, Japan, Guam, United States, we will respond in a way that you no longer exist. So that's a statement of fact.
But what about the president's extremely fiery rhetoric, though? I mean, today we've had his Secretary of State and his Defence Secretary having to follow his lead. But what about his tone?
Well, it's his tone, but also the language used. He said, if North Korea continues to threaten our allies, well, that's different than taking action. They are known for making threats.
That's what they do.
They made a threat immediately after he said that. So when you draw a line verbally or rhetorically and saying, if you make any more threats against our allies, we will respond with fire and fury. Well, they just made a threat. Now the question is, were we serious, or were we bluffing, or are we misinterpreting what the president is saying? So we have to be clear. The one thing when you're dealing with war is that you have to be very clear, very concise and precise. And to the extent you create ambiguity, you enhance the danger of miscalculation. So I think what Secretary Mattis said, if you take any actions which threaten us or our allies, it will be the end of your regime.
So he was clear at least. But the president trades in bluster, doesn't he? Much like the North Koreans do. So are we basically ending up on their level?
Well, it's sort of like schoolyard taunting. My gun is bigger and better than your gun is. And I think that words don't matter as much. I don't think we can threaten the North Koreans that will matter. If we take action, for example, as we did diplomatically by squeezing them economically, if we put back in, right now the South Korean president has put a hold on the THAAD missile, anti-missile system, put that back on track. That is something that will get the attention not only of the North Koreans, but the Chinese. Have the Japanese do the same. So there are things that we can do that will squeeze the North Korean regime, because they've had the benefit of having a guns and butter policy. They've had the guns, and China and Russia and others have given them the butter. You start taking the butter away, they've got to make a different calculation. So I think that the president's policy of squeezing them is the correct one. About threatening them with fire and fury, if they ever make another threat, well, that turns out to be an empty threat.
Well, one assistant to the president said today that the brinkmanship with North Korea was comparable to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Is that amping it up too much?
I don't think it's comparable at all. I think when you talk about the Russians having a nuclear weapon in Cuba, 90 miles off the coast of the United States, it's quite different. Number two, we don't know that the North Koreans at this point in time have a capability of putting a nuclear missile together with a miniature warhead that can strike all of the United States. They may get there, and that's the reason why we have to stop them from moving forward. The way you stop them is to, again, squeeze the economy, squeeze them diplomatically, put in defensive equipment in South Korea, Japan, more so even in the United States than we currently have, but we have a defense system. So there are things that we can do in the short term to really squeeze them, and I think Secretary Tillerson has set the right tone. We're going to do this working with our allies. If it's just us threatening them, then I think it causes more dissension, more of a split with us and our allies, including the South Koreans.
And Secretary Cohen, it sounds like you feel there should be a peaceful solution here.
There has to be one. We can't bomb a country into submission. If they attack us, if they launch any missile attack or bomb any part of our allies and us, then obviously we're going to respond with overwhelming force. But there needs to be a settlement of the entire agreement. We need the Chinese involved, the Russians involved, the Japanese, the South Koreans, and the North Koreans. We can do that.